presentation because I apologize, I have to be in my office down the street at 11. There's another group in. It's one of these unusually busy days, but in 15 minutes I'm going to try to give you a quick overview of what we see the Silicon Valley Bay Area innovation system looking like. Essentially, I'm going to try to help map it out for you. Just a word of background, my institute, it's the research and analytical arm, the strategy arm, basically a think tank for regional businesses. But we're also supported by regional government and the university. So our job is to look at what's driving the economy, what's holding it back, what's going to affect its competitiveness and growth in the future. We think 3 or 5 years in the future, what should we be focusing on today that either works or doesn't work to help people plan for that. So this is just a quick look at the innovation system. I think that's the right arrow. There we are. This is based on you can all see around, good. A study we did last year where we talked to dozens and dozens and dozens of companies and labs and universities, and we tried to piece the picture together. And the perspective is overall that, so the region really is widely known around the world as the principal innovation hub. It's not the only one, but it's certainly the leading one. And why is that? Well, one, it's an ecosystem. It's a very organic entity with very different actors and institutions that interact. And it's not just the institutions and the companies, but it's the linkages between them that makes the difference. It's the networks that let them interact very fluidly together. So it's these institutions and companies linked by many, many different networks. And then it's all informed by a business culture, basically. Certain cultural values that help the system accelerate the implementation of ideas. And a lot of that has to do with the acceptance of risk, the acceptance of failure. Ideas that go back actually to the gold rush. And a lot of people came here, including Italians, and they basically took a big risk. A lot of them failed, some of them succeeded very well, but acceptance of risk and failure is very much part of the business culture that helps explain what happens. So the key components, just very briefly, one big block is the universities. There's 4 campuses at the University of California, and of course there's Stanford. Basically, their role is they generate a lot of licenses and patents. They generate a lot of technologies that get commercialized. But more important than that, it's the human capital flow. They attract some very, very talented people from around the world, around the country. And when they leave the campus, they're the ones that found the companies. And you look at a lot of the big technology and other companies in the region, many of them are 20, 10, 15, 5 years old or less. Most were founded by people who developed an idea while they were a student and they left the campus and they started that idea. In the case of biotech, it's a little bit different. It tends to be faculty. It's a very sophisticated area. It requires very advanced thinking. It's not like designing an application. And so we find most of the biotech companies being founded by faculty from the major universities. And the other thing that universities do, the companies tell us, is they provide a common ground, a neutral ground, where even competitors can get together and talk about the future, where's technology going, what issues are going to impact them all together. So the universities play a very effective role in doing that. Well, there are other universities too, of course, and they're all important to the process. We've got our state universities, which are 4-year degree programs. There's several here. They tend to provide the engineers, the bachelor's level engineers that populate much of the workforce in Silicon Valley. And then the community colleges, which are 2-year degree institutions, tend to provide a lot of the technicians. And you need all 3. It's not just the PhD scientists. But all together, they play a really fundamental role in supporting and generating continuously a highly educated workforce. And I think thinking about the major universities that are research universities, one distinguishing factor is not just the number, but the quality of the programs. And you can see here there are more top-rated medicine, science, and engineering graduate programs here than anywhere else in the country. The region that we are most similar to is Boston, also another big tech center. So there's often comparisons to the Bay Area and Boston. But this indicates that certainly the quality of the graduate programs as well as the numbers is very, very important. This simply indicates a lot of patents come out of the University of California. Let's get that. Another big factor here are the federal research laboratories. These are federal government laboratories, we have 5, that have historically done classified research for the government, a lot around energy and nuclear energy. In recent years, they are all in their own ways looking for ways to essentially move off campus, to make their technologies more accessible to businesses and entrepreneurs so it gets commercialized and they are part of the economy of the region. So that's a process. It's underway now. They're all working to see how to do that. But it means their model is changing from being closed-door institutions where one of their objectives is to get their technology out on the streets the best way they can. And there are some new models for that. One I would mention, the bottom one, the Livermore Sandia Open Campus. So Lawrence Livermore and Sandia National Laboratory, they're both in the East Bay. They're both national security facilities, but they've created an open space between them what they call the open campus, which is anybody can come and go, and they're locating facilities there that make it easier for entrepreneurs and businesses to come and go and use their facilities. And it links up to entrepreneurial support programs that we're generating. So it's just one example of how even the big federal institutions are looking for ways to push their technology and research into the economy. Which gets us into some really interesting areas of hybrid institutions. More and more of these institutions are collaborating together. So the Joint Bioenergy Institute, which is in the East Bay, near Berkeley, but not on the campus. Sorry, not on the campus. You can see here is a collaboration of actually a half a dozen universities and laboratories. And they focus on research on very specific applications of renewable energy, and with the idea of commercializing it. It's pure research, but it's focused on commercialization with private sector partners. The key part of this is with private sector partners. The other innovation or experiment we've done has been the California Centers for Science and Innovation. And they were created maybe 12 years ago by the state of California to leverage the resources of the University of California to help advance the economy in strategic ways. And the requirement for these, and there's 4 of them in California, 2 of them up here, is they need to be a collaboration of multiple campuses, can't be just one, and they're focused on strategic areas of future priority. So in Southern California, there's one on telecommunications and one on nanotech. Up here, there's 2. One, Citrus, is focused on the societal applications of information technology, and another QB3, which is really bioinformatics, translational medicine, personalized medicine, and how you apply information technology to medical and life science research. The key thing about these is they're based at the universities, but most of their revenue comes from industry. It is collaborative research with industry because they're designed not just to develop research, but to do it in ways that will push that research out into the commercial marketplace. And then there are independent research facilities. These are nonprofit, but they're a very important part of the ecosystem that sometimes they'll do research on contract. Often they're using federal grants, but they're a very important part of the ecosystem as well. Which gets us to the corporate laboratories. So these are just representative names. There's many more, but they're good examples. So a lot of these companies are headquartered here, of course, Google, Intel, Apple, and others. But many are actually not headquartered here. They're headquartered from around the United States, and actually many, many, many from around the world. And what are they doing? Those companies are putting R&D laboratories here in the Bay Area to tap into that conversation about innovation. Where is the leading edge of technology going? To tap into the venture capital flows and to look at how what is happening here technologically may impact their industry. So a good example would be the automotive sector. Most major automotive companies in the world have an R&D center in the Bay Area. And we're not known as an automobile town or region. We're not Detroit. We're not Turin. We're, technology. But all of these automotive companies are saying that the future design of cars is going to be heavily impacted by what is happening in information technology and how IT will be integrated into future vehicles. And that's what they're looking at. You find companies like Walmart Labs, they're headquartered in Arkansas, but they have a big laboratory here looking at the IT applications for how Walmart does business globally. And you can do it for many other industries, but what it does suggest is it's not all about companies that are headquartered here. It's very much about companies from elsewhere in the US and around the world who are here to participate in the same conversation about the future of technology. So kind of shifting to the smaller scale now, from very big to small scale, part of that network, that connecting network in the region is a sort of an archipelago of incubators and accelerators that support very young startups and early stage companies. They can be independent, they can be sponsored by cities, by universities, many are sponsored by corporations, many are sponsored by foreign governments. They generally have the same purpose. Some put money in as investments, some don't, but they, as a rule, aim to bring companies here, give them inexpensive office space for a period of time, give them advice and support about how to do business here, how to deal with patent and other kind of regulatory questions. But most importantly, to get them introduced to the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, get them introduced to potential partners and to networks, and if possible, to venture capital and angel investors. So they can bring that network home. And very often what they end up doing is being dual national companies. They may have their headquarters, their founders are, let's say, in Italy, but they may have a US entity here that work together to do different but complementary things. And that's often the outcome. So we counted 65 last year. I try to keep a running tab, and I think there's 75 or 80 now. So it's an area that's been growing rapidly. Another thing that really distinguishes the region in terms of innovation is the role of venture capital. The industry was basically created here. Consistently about 35 to 40, sometimes 45% of all the venture capital invested in the United States is invested within about 50 miles of where we are here. And even though the share of US investment in global venture investment has been declining, for the Bay Area it has remained constant, which suggests that in the US, the Bay Area is still a premier place where venture capital is located and the investment takes place. So we counted, again, about 300 venture firms in the region. They are of varying size and varying quality. They're not all the same, but certainly the better known ones are leaders in their industry. And they're one of the reasons that many younger early stage companies come here, because very often, wherever they may start, when they need to access venture capital, they need to scale up. Very often they feel they need to be here to be close to where the capital is, to where the investment will happen, to enable them to grow up to the next stage. This just shows that most of the venture capital in the US is in California somewhere, and most of that is here in the Bay Area, and the share has been increasing over time. Another phenomenon, though, is corporate venture capital. There are many, many major corporations that have their own venture capital units that are investing in young companies that they either might acquire or that have technologies that may produce products and services that are complementary to their own and will help their major business units grow. And often these may be paired with incubators or accelerators. So the companies are very much in the game. And it would not be enough just to talk about venture capital, but angel investors play a very big role. The venture industry has been, over the last several years, been focusing more on later stage companies, which are less risky, and larger amounts of investment makes it more difficult for startups. And so the role of angel investors has actually become more important for those startup companies that may find it difficult to access venture capital in their early stages. And there are lots of networks here that enable those smaller companies to access the capital. So this kind of summarizes all of that. You can see in the middle there at the top is the universities. The first tier on the bottom are corporate labs. The next tier are the federal laboratories. You have on the QB3 on the left is in Citrus, those are the hybrid institutions. On the right, they're independent labs. In the middle are the entrepreneurs who are supported and connected to universities, but they're supported and connected to the angel investors, the VCs, and the incubators. But what I would suggest you focus on here is not the boxes, but the arrows, because what we did is we talked to people in all these institutions, and many others, and said, who do you work with? And they all said, oh, we work with those. So what's happening, clearly, is the innovation isn't happening in silos. It's happening as the universities work with the companies. The companies work with the federal laboratories. They're all connected to incubators and accelerators and venture capital. So it's really the connections between the institutions and the companies and the patterns of cooperation and collaboration that make it work, rather than just who happens to be on the field. So the bottom line, I think, to all of this, sort of thematically, I would say, is when we look at the demographics, people from around the world are absolutely fundamental here. We have enormous populations of people from virtually everywhere in the world and across Europe who live here and are part of this system. More than half of all the technology companies in Silicon Valley have been founded by somebody who was not born here, somebody who came here from another country. So it's absolutely fundamental. I mentioned the question of business culture, the idea that there's a very high level of acceptance of the idea of risk and failure. That thinking is, if you won't succeed big, probably if you don't take a risk. If you take a risk, you may very well fail. But that's okay, because you took the risk. And even if you fail, I don't want to call it a badge of honor, but it's something that people expect to see, that this person has a certain level of maturity, having gone through the process, and eventually, even if they fail once or twice, you definitely can get another round of funding for what might be another good idea. So that's part of the story. Goes back to the gold rush, when everybody rushed in here looking for gold, and most of them failed, but some succeeded really well. And then the final thing is this idea of permeability, mobility, flexibility, the idea that you have a lot of interaction across scientific and technological disciplines, but the key thing is the flow of information to people, between universities and private industry, between federal labs and private industry, between universities and venture capital, universities and incubators, startups, and all of those people. So it's not to say there aren't barriers. There absolutely are barriers, but the institutional walls or barriers that inhibit collaboration and cooperation, the sharing of information here, are probably lower than they are anywhere in the world. And that is what sort of enables the acceleration of ideas, the flow of ideas and the interaction of ideas that helps innovation happen faster than it would otherwise, and that tends to move technologies from the laboratory into commercialization faster than it happens anywhere else. So I'll skip that. A few metrics. The region produces by far, by a huge measure, more patents than anywhere in the country. It's been the case for a long time. It's not the only metric, but it's a fair one. You can see that social media is huge here, especially in recent years. Most of those companies tend to be here, especially in San Francisco. Clean tech has been another growth sector. Most of the growing, innovative clean tech companies tend to be in California, primarily in the Bay Area. So we see it as a long-term growth area. And then, as I mentioned, I wouldn't want to leave the impression that this happens only here. So innovation is happening around the world. There are immense pools of talent and capability throughout the world. So a lot of our companies have laboratories across the world. They're investing many, many places, including in Italy. And as you saw earlier, there's a lot of cross-investment here.
especially in R&D. So R&D is, as we see it, is more and more collaborative. It's more and more based on global networks, tapping into the best pools of talent, the best pools of expertise to create essentially global clouds. We've got our challenges. It's not all easy. We're concerned about the amount of federal research money available in the future. It's been stagnant. We're concerned about support from the state of California for the higher education system here. It's been declining. We're concerned about visa restrictions that make it more difficult for business people and entrepreneurs to come here and to stay here. Access to capital, even with all that venture capital and angel money, it's still a problem, and we're a very expensive place to do business. We're the most expensive place in the United States, along with Manhattan. So those are all, issues we struggle with all the time that are kind of the dark side of the upside I just mentioned. So bottom line, just to summarize, we see this as a value chain, a very unique one. There's public and private research organizations, a lot of private companies, there's risk capital at the table that enables things to move faster, and there's a lot of specialized supporting services in accounting firms and law firms and other places that have specialized knowledge of their industries and of IPOs and commercialization and biotech and other industries that can help these companies grow faster, address issues faster. So the supporting services is very, very important. Again, the scale is really important. It builds on itself, but companies can scale up here. And again, the key isn't just the components, it's the fluidity with which they can interact, the fluidity with which people and ideas can move around the region. There are very few barriers to participation. You can come here from anywhere in the world, it doesn't matter, and check in right away, if you can get a visa. It's a big gift. And again, we're globally situated. I think everybody here recognizes that so much of this happens with global partners who come here, we're situated around the world, we invest around the world, and so the way we try to think of the region is not by any means the only place this happens, but as the premier global hub, it's sort of a global marketplace of ideas that enables innovation to happen around the world. And that's the short map. Would be happy to take any. I got 5 minutes, great. Any questions? Absolutely, I'll try to answer. Please.